What happens when America's most hardened political journalist confronts the most scrutinized royal figure of the modern age? Live on national television. This wasn't supposed to be controversial. This wasn't supposed to be emotional. But when George Stephanopoulos sat across from Meghan Markle on Good Morning America, what began as a routine promo for her new initiative quickly exploded into one of the most intense, uncomfortable, and revealing interviews ever aired on morning television. "And yes," she cried, "if you want to see the moment Meghan's composure cracked, the exact words George used to pierce through the PR polish and the tension that electrified the studio, keep watching. And don't forget to subscribe and sound off in the comments. What do you think really happened behind the scenes?" The lights were blinding. George Stephanopoulos reviewed his notes one last time. Across from him, Meghan Markle sat poised in a cream blazer, her signature smile unshaken. But that would soon change. "Meghan, thank you for being here," George began smoothly. "You're here to talk about your new charitable project. But before we get to that, I think our viewers deserve clarity on a few other topics first." There was a flicker, subtle, but a hesitation behind Meghan's eyes. George caught it immediately. "Of course, George," she said. "I've always been an open book. Are you?" Though, his tone didn't shift, but the air in the studio did. Then came the barrage questions about inconsistencies in past interviews, about claims of isolation and mental health struggles. George cited unnamed palace sources who said help had been offered. Meghan straightened. "George, there's a difference between being offered help and actually being able to access it. Having people around doesn't mean you feel supported." "But surely you knew what you were walking into," George pressed. "This wasn't a surprise. The scrutiny, the protocol. You married into it." "I knew there would be challenges," she replied carefully. "But I don't think anyone can fully prepare for the level of intensity." George nodded. "Let's talk about intensity. We've obtained internal correspondence suggesting you were offered therapy, support meetings, multiple avenues for help. Were you unaware of these?" Silence. Meghan's hands, once steady, began to fidget with her ring. "I'm sorry. Correspondence." "Internal palace communications?" George clarified. "Meetings, support systems, outreach from family members. Are you saying you didn't know about any of it?" Meghan swallowed. "I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding between what looks like help and what feels like help. Yes, meetings happened. But when you're in crisis, bureaucracy feels like a wall, not a lifeline. These weren't bureaucratic processes." George pushed, voice sharp now. "These were personal interventions. Are you saying none of that felt real?" A long pause. Meghan's jaw tightened. When an institution has functioned the same way for centuries, even well-meaning gestures get lost in tradition. So, the institution failed you. "I wouldn't say failed." "Then, what would you say?" Another pause. Meghan shifted. "I'd say good intentions don't fix systems that haven't evolved." George leaned back, studying her face. "That's a diplomatic answer. But this is your mental health. Are you saying the system simply wasn't built to support you?" "It means..." She started, then paused, voice catching. "It means you can be surrounded by process and still feel completely alone." "But you weren't alone. You had Harry." That landed like a gut punch. Her composure slipped. "Yes, I had Harry, but Harry was fighting his own battles, his own family, his own role. So he couldn't help you." "He tried," she said quietly. "But it wasn't enough." Silence. The kind that consumes a room. The kind that makes everyone lean in, waiting for the moment someone finally breaks. George delivered the final blow. "I'm just trying to understand. From where I'm sitting, it looks like a family and an institution that tried. And you're saying it wasn't enough. So what exactly was enough?" Meghan looked at him. Her eyes shimmered, and for the first time on live television, she had no answer. "I'm trying to understand what would have been adequate." George said evenly. Meghan's breathing grew more visible, slightly deeper, chest rising and falling with barely contained emotion. Adequate, she repeated, her voice steady but simmering. Would have meant acknowledging that the situation was unprecedented. Adequate would have meant flexibility, adaptability, in how things were handled. Unprecedented how? Her eyes narrowed. Come on, George. You know exactly how. I'd like you to tell me. The challenge was unmistakable. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was a confrontation, and both of them knew it. Meghan's expression flickered, anger, maybe, or something more wounded. Because I was the first person in that family who looked like me. Because the media coverage I faced was unlike anything before. Because the scrutiny wasn't just intense, it carried racial undertones, whether people want to admit that or not. George nodded slowly. So you're saying the treatment was different because of your race? I'm saying the context was different, she clarified, and that context wasn't factored into how I was supported, or how the situation was handled. But surely that context was obvious to everyone from the start. You'd think so, she said, a faint edge of sarcasm coloring her tone. George caught it immediately. So you're suggesting your husband's family, people who've spent their lives in the public eye, somehow failed to anticipate or prepare for the challenges you'd face. I'm saying anticipating something and adequately preparing for it are two very different things, and they didn't prepare. Clearly not. Or we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. George set his papers down slowly, deliberately, signaling a shift. Meghan, with respect, you're sidestepping a direct question. Either the family and the institution gave you the support you needed, or they didn't. Which is it? A long silence followed. Meghan's hands, which had been toying with her ring, now gripped the arms of her chair. Her knuckles turned faintly white beneath the surface. That's not a fair characterization of what I'm saying, she replied at last. But her voice had lost some of its earlier control. Then help me understand. George pressed. His tone was still courteous, but relentless. Because what I'm hearing is that despite documented attempts at support, despite expressions of concern and access to professional resources, you still felt completely abandoned. Meghan inhaled deeply, perhaps deeper than she meant to. It showed. George, I never said I felt completely abandoned. Didn't you? He asked, holding up a sheet. Because I have the transcript right here from your earlier interview. You said, and I quote, there were times when I felt like I had nowhere to turn. Like I was completely on my own. That sounds like abandonment. The precision of the quote caught her off guard. She blinked quickly, too quickly, and George noticed. Context matters, she said. Those words describe specific moments, not my entire experience. Moments when the system failed. Moments when I felt overwhelmed, even if support technically existed. So support did exist. Some support, she admitted. But earlier, you suggested it didn't, or wasn't accessible. No, she corrected. I said there's a difference between support existing on paper and support being effectively delivered. George leaned forward, sensing an opening. Meghan, you're intelligent, accomplished. You understand how institutions work. Are you telling me you couldn't effectively communicate your needs to people trying to help you? The question landed like a surgical strike. Meghan's poise cracked more visibly now. For the first time, the audience could see something raw. She stopped, collected herself. That's not what I'm saying. Then what did prevent effective communication? Because either your needs were clearly expressed and ignored, or they weren't clearly expressed. Which is it? It's not that simple. Why not? The rapid-fire exchange was wearing on her. Her breathing shallowed, and her fingers rose to touch her throat, subtle, involuntary, revealing. Because when you're in crisis, when your mental health is unraveling, it's hard to articulate what you need. And sometimes the people around you Even well-meaning ones don't know how to respond. Or they misinterpret it altogether. But Harry must have understood. Surely he knew what you were going through. Harry was doing his best. That's not what I asked. I asked if he understood. Another pause. Heavier this time. Meghan's eyes were glossier now, more vulnerable than at any point before. Harry was dealing with his own complicated relationship with his family. So he couldn't help you navigate yours. It wasn't my family, George, wasn't it? You married into it. Did I, though? The bitterness slipped out before she could catch it. George jumped on it. What do you mean by that? She seemed to realize she'd gone further than intended. She leaned back, trying to recover. But it was too late. The damage was done. The polished surface had cracked. I mean, becoming part of a family and being accepted as part of a family are not the same thing. So you didn't feel accepted. I felt tolerated. Even she looked surprised at the honesty of that admission. George recognized the shift immediately. His tone softened, but he didn't let up. Tolerated by whom? She hesitated. By the institution. Not necessarily individual family members. But the institution and the family aren't always separate. No, she said. That's something I had to learn the hard way. What does that mean exactly? It means that sometimes the people you want to connect with, the ones you need intimacy from, are constrained by protocols, by expectations, by duty, and that makes real human connection almost impossible. George, are we talking about your relationship with your husband's father? Meghan flinched. Just slightly, but it was there. Her hands dropped to her lap, fingers interlocking, knuckles whitening. Meghan, I'd rather not get into specifics about individual relationships. George, why not? You've spoken publicly about them before. Meghan, I've shared my experience. That's different from talking about other people's choices or motivations. George, but your experience involved those people, didn't it? Meghan, of course it did. George, then help me understand. When you felt unsupported, who exactly failed to support you? The question hovered in the silence like a blade. Meghan glanced at her hands, then slowly met George's gaze. For the first time, her eyes shimmered, tears threatening at the corners. Meghan, George, I think you're trying to get me to say something that would hurt people I still care about. George, I'm asking you to clarify serious claims you've made publicly. If you say you were abandoned or failed, where, specifically, did that failure happen? She inhaled shakily. Meghan, the failure. The failure was in not recognizing that I needed something different. Something that hadn't been done before. George, different how? Meghan, in understanding that my background, my identity, brought unique challenges that couldn't be handled with the usual script. George, and when you expressed those challenges, what was the response? Meghan, the response was often, this is how it's always been. You need to adapt to the system. Never the other way around. George leaned in, sensing they were circling something deeper. George, who said that to you? Her eyes brimmed with tears now. She blinked fast, trying to contain them. Meghan, it wasn't always said outright, George. Sometimes it was in what wasn't done, what wasn't said. George, but someone must have said it clearly at some point. She hesitated. Meghan. Yes. The word was so soft it barely registered. George. Who? That single word seemed to hit a nerve. Her composure buckled. One tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it quickly, but the cameras caught it all. Meghan. I can't name names. I won't put people in that position. Georgie, even if they put you in an impossible position. Meghan especially then. George sat back slightly, not relenting, but recognizing the fracture in her armor. George, Meghan, you've made powerful allegations about racism, about neglect, about feeling completely alone. But when pressed, you retreat into generalities. Doesn't the public deserve more clarity? The dam finally broke. Tears rolled freely now, though she still fought for composure. Meghan, the public deserves honesty. But that doesn't mean I have to destroy relationships or name people just to satisfy curiosity. George, but didn't you already do that? In past interviews. The words struck like a hammer. Meghan's face crumpled. She looked stunned, exposed. It took her several long seconds to even find breath. She sat frozen, the weight of the accusation settling heavy. Meghan, that's not what I meant to do. George kept his voice calm, but firm, decades of journalism behind every word. George, but wasn't that the result? You went on television and described being abandoned, unsupported, alone. Isn't that putting others on trial, without ever naming them? Meghan, I was trying to share my truth. George, your truth, or the truth. The distinction landed like a slap. Her composure finally cracked. Her shoulders shook. The tears poured freely now. Meghan, George, please. But George didn't let go. Not yet. George, Meghan, either it happened the way you say it did, or it didn't. Either the institution failed you, or it didn't. Which is it? Meghan, and it's complicated. She was sobbing now, any facade of calm gone. George, what's complicated about it? Meghan, because... She choked on the words. Because maybe some of it was my fault, too. The air shifted. A confession. Quite devastating. George leaned forward. What part was your fault? Meghan covered her face. Her shoulders trembled. When she looked up again, her makeup was smudged, her expression raw. Meghan, maybe I didn't try hard enough to fit in. Maybe I assumed the worst too quickly. Maybe I expected too much too soon. George, so? Were your previous statements inaccurate? Meghan, I'm saying, when you're hurt and angry, you don't always see the full picture. You only see your pain. George's voice softened a shade. George, then, what is the full picture? She breathed deeply, shaky, uneven. Meghan, the full picture is, I walked into a world I thought I understood. But I didn't. I had expectations, unrealistic ones. And when it got hard, I blamed people, instead of asking what I could change in myself. George, so the institution didn't fail you. Meghan, the institution is what it is. It's been that way for centuries. I can't expect it to change just because I showed up. George, what about the people within that institution? Your husband's family. The question hit like a dagger. Meghan's breath caught, and fresh tears welled in her eyes. Her voice cracked as she tried to respond. They tried, George, she whispered. In their own way, within the limits of what they knew. They really tried. And her voice broke completely. I wasn't fair to them. How weren't you fair? George asked gently. I expected them to understand things they'd never had to understand before. I expected them to change their entire way of being, just because it didn't work for me. I wanted them to prioritize my comfort over centuries of tradition and protocol. George narrowed his eyes, watching her closely. Are you saying the racism allegations were unfounded? The question made her flinch. Her face crumpled, and she buried it in her hands, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. I don't know, she finally whispered. At the time I believed it. I thought that's what it was. But now, I don't know if I mistook ignorance for malice. Maybe it wasn't racism. Maybe they just didn't know how to handle something new. Something unfamiliar. So you might have been wrong. I might have been wrong about some things. Yes, the admission seemed to drain her. Meghan slumped in her chair, smaller now. Fragile in a way she hadn't appeared at any point in the interview. George's voice remained soft, but persistent. And Harry, was he supportive through all of this? Tears spilled again. He was caught in an impossible position, and I put him there. He was trying to support me while also holding on to his family. But she stopped, choking on the words. I made him choose. How did you make him choose? By turning everything into us versus them. By refusing to compromise. By making him feel like he had to take sides instead of helping him build a bridge. Do you regret that now? This time, the sob came from her gut. Meghan doubled over, completely overcome. When she finally managed to speak, it was a whisper. I regret so much, George. I regret not trying harder, not being more patient, not understanding that change takes time. I regret hurting people who didn't deserve it. George let the silence linger before pressing forward. Do you regret the earlier interviews, where you made the allegations? Her face, streaked with tears, lifted slowly. Her eyes were swollen, red, searching. I regret that I spoke from pain instead of understanding, that my words hurt people I still love. I regret that the story I told might not have been the whole story. Are you saying you lied? I'm saying that what felt like the truth in my pain might not have been the complete truth. When you're hurting, you don't see clearly. I wish I'd waited. I wish I'd taken more time to process it all before going public. George leaned forward, voice calm and exacting. If you could speak to your husband's family now, what would you say? That broke her. Meghan collapsed into a soul-deep cry, gasping for breath between sobs. I'd say I'm sorry, she choked. I'd say I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt them, and I never wanted that. I'd say I wish we could start over. But I know that's probably not possible. Why not? Her answer came between shaky breaths. Because some things can't be unsaid. Some damage can't be undone. Some trust, once broken, doesn't come back. George leaned back, watching as the confident, composed woman who had once held the world's attention now crumbled before it. Do you think this interview will help or hurt your relationship with Harry's family? Meghan stared at him, visibly weighing the question. I don't know, she whispered. I hope that maybe, by owning my part, by taking responsibility, maybe that's a first step. Maybe it leads to healing. And if it doesn't? Her shoulders sank. She lowered her head into her hands, crying quietly now. Then at least I'll know I finally told the whole truth, not just my version of it. George looked down at his notes, then into the camera. We'll be right back after this break. As the screen faded to commercial, the audience was left with one lasting image: Meghan Markle. No longer the poised public figure, but a woman stripped bare by remorse. Tears streamed down her face as the weight of years of division, misunderstanding, and public scrutiny settled over her. What was supposed to be a discussion about charitable work had become a televised reckoning, a moment of brutal self-awareness and public confession, one that would be replayed, dissected, and debated for years to come. Was George too harsh? Or was this the accountability moment the world needed to see? Let me know in the comments below, did Meghan finally face the truth, or just rewrite it? And more importantly, what should her next move be?